To live well is not merely to survive the years, nor to gather possessions, admiration, victories, or proof that one has been right. To live well is something quieter, deeper, and more difficult. It is to move through the world without allowing the world to harden the heart. It is to keep clarity without cruelty, kindness without weakness, dignity without pride, and hope without illusion. Many people spend a lifetime seeking the secret of peace in distant places, not realizing that the true beginning of peace lies in how one speaks, how one forgives, how one lets go, and how one carries oneself through the ordinary hours of an ordinary day. A person may have a good heart, yet if their temper is hot and their words are sharp, others will still retreat from them. This is one of life's quiet truths. Good intentions do not always soften the wound caused by harsh expression. One may be correct in reason and still lose in spirit. One may possess truth and yet fail to preserve love. Therefore, wisdom is not only a matter of what one says, but of how one says it. Principle may be upright, but temperament should remain gentle. To be firm without violence, clear without insult, and honest without humiliation, this is a refinement of character more valuable than cleverness. There is a kind of strength in restraint that the impulsive rarely understand. Not every truth needs to be hurled like a weapon. Not every fault in another requires immediate exposure. Not every conflict deserves the full force of our indignation. A person who knows how to pause before speaking has already won half the battle with themselves. And often that inner victory is greater than any outer triumph. For words, once released, do not return untouched. They enter another's heart and live there in ways we may never fully know. A careless sentence may remain for years where a thoughtful silence might have spared a lifetime of distance. Forgiveness, too, belongs to this hidden order of wisdom. To forgive is not to erase wrongdoing, nor to surrender judgment, nor to invite harm to return again and again without limit. Forgiveness is first an act of freeing one's own heart from the weight of endless bitterness. One who forgives once may be generous. One who forgives twice may be compassionate. But one who forgives without discernment, who repeatedly opens the same door to the same destruction, mistakes softness for virtue. The heart should be broad, but not unguarded. Mercy is beautiful, but it must walk beside understanding. To pardon with wisdom is noble. To tolerate evil without boundary is merely to abandon oneself. Before criticizing others, one should learn to stand before the mirror of the self. It is easy to detect the flaws of another because they stand outside us, visible and convenient. Our own flaws, however, are woven into our habits, our motives, our justifications, our blind spots. We excuse in ourselves what we condemn in others. We name our anger, honesty, our pride, self-respect, our stubbornness, principle, our selfishness, necessity. Yet genuine maturity begins when a person no longer rushes to judge, but first asks quietly, "Am I whole enough to accuse? Am I free enough from the same weakness I condemn?" This kind of self-examination softens the heart, not into passivity, but into humility. Much suffering in life does not come from the great tragedies alone, but from the friction of unnecessary things, needless arguments, wounded vanity, idle gossip, comparisons, rumors, resentment carried too long, expectations placed where they do not belong. It is not always heavy labor that exhausts a person most. Often it is entanglement. Work may tire the body, but trivial conflict tires the soul. Busyness can sometimes protect a person from pettiness, while too much idleness gives the mind room to manufacture unrest. A life without purpose becomes dangerously available to bitterness. A life guided by meaningful effort, even if difficult, retains a kind of hidden dignity. There are wounds that do not come from enemies at all, but from those to whom we offered trust. It is rarely the stranger's betrayal that shatters us most deeply. It is the coldness of one we once cherished, the mockery of one to whom we once confided, the indifference of one for whom we once would have suffered gladly. Yet even here, life teaches something severe and necessary. Sincerity does not guarantee reciprocity. To be genuine is right, but it does not mean all others will be worthy of that genuineness. One must learn the painful art of continuing to value sincerity without becoming naive, continuing to trust goodness without placing trust blindly in every hand extended toward us. The finest conduct in human relationships is not loud devotion, emotional display, or dramatic declarations of loyalty. It is something quieter, respect that remains even in familiarity, patience that survives irritation, gentleness that does not disappear after intimacy has stripped away formality. Many people are courteous to strangers and careless with loved ones. Yet the truest measure of character is found not in how one treats the distant, but in how one treats those who are near enough to be wounded most easily. To remain respectful with family, patient with close friends, considerate with a spouse, and humane even when disappointed. This is a discipline of the soul. To know how to dissolve sorrow without spreading it is wisdom. To know how to carry love without possessing, controlling, or exhausting others is happiness. Many people believe happiness is something to be seized, displayed, and defended. But happiness, in its deepest form, is much quieter than that. It is not born from comparison, not secured by status, and not proven by applause. It grows where gratitude is cultivated, where expectations are moderated, where the mind ceases demanding that life be arranged according to personal preference. Happiness is often nothing more glamorous than a calm conscience, a sound body, an untroubled night, and a heart that still has tenderness left in it. Time, perhaps more than anything else, reveals what truly matters. Time is impartial. It gives equally to all and spares no one from its law. Those who say they have no time for rest will one day make time for illness. Those who say they have no time for family will one day discover they have too much time for loneliness. Those who neglect the body in pursuit of ambition will someday have to negotiate with decline. Time does not punish in anger. It simply balances what has been ignored. What we misuse in one season must be repaid in another. There are debts of the spirit just as there are debts of money, and time collects both. Life is often compared to a journey, a river, a dream, but it is also, in a sober sense, a narrowing. Every year removes as much as it grants. Every gain is accompanied by some invisible subtraction. We do not always notice it at first. We imagine there will be another season to speak kindly, another year to visit our parents, another opportunity to care for our health, another chance to mend what has been neglected. But not all chances return. There are words spoken in an instant that cannot be undone in decades. There are absences that no wealth can reverse. A person at the edge of death would trade all reputation for one more steady breath. That is why one should learn early that what is ceaseful, loving, and necessary should not be postponed without reason. Independence, too, is one of life's sobering lessons. There is kindness in the world, yes, and people do help one another. But no one is obligated to save us from ourselves. To wait passively for emotional rescue, financial rescue, spiritual rescue, is to hand away too much power over one's own life. One should be grateful for help, but not dependent on it as a condition for standing. There is a kind of dignity in becoming inwardly sturdy, in learning to bear what must be borne, to rebuild after disappointment, to continue after rejection, to remain kind without relying on constant reassurance. Strength is not the absence of pain. It is the refusal to become helpless before it. It is a mistake to choose people by their shine. Wealth dazzles the eye, but reveals little about the soul. Some who have abundance will not part with a crumb. Others, though poor in possessions, are rich in loyalty. They will share the little they have, divide their last comfort, stand beside you when you have nothing left to offer them in return. These are the rare ones, and to recognize them is a form of wisdom no less important than intelligence. Character matters more than appearance. Constancy matters more than charm. In a world that celebrates display, one must train the heart to perceive substance. Eventually, one comes to see that this world was never arranged for any one individual's convenience. The earth does not rotate to suit our moods. The seasons do not pause for our sorrow. The universe is not hostile, but neither is it centered upon us. This realization, if accepted humbly, becomes liberation. Once we stop expecting life to obey our preferences, we suffer less from disappointment. Once we understand that loss, change, aging, and uncertainty belong to the structure of existence itself, we begin to live less like entitled claimants and more like mindful guests. We arrive empty-handed and we depart the same way. Yet while living, people cling fiercely to what was never theirs in permanence: wealth, houses, titles, admiration, appearances, influence. None of these is evil in itself. Wealth can be useful. A house can shelter. Reputation may reflect honest effort. But once these things cease to serve life and begin to define worth, trouble follows. Enough is a blessing. Excess often becomes anxiety. A home should protect the heart, not burden it. Food should nourish, not enslave appetite. Status should be worn lightly, if at all, because whatever rests too heavily upon the ego sooner or later becomes a source of fear. Meaning does not require luxury. A life may be small in appearance and yet immense in peace. Another may be crowded with possessions and barren in spirit. Happiness does not arise from outranking others, but from inhabiting one's own life deeply enough to perceive its quiet worth. Stability does not come from controlling every outer condition, but from building an inner place that does not collapse each time circumstances change. A person who depends entirely on external conditions for peace will never know peace for long. But one who has cultivated an inner ground can endure storms without losing their center. Human beings are strange in their power. A kind heart can shelter many lives. A malicious heart can poison an entire household, an entire workplace, even generations after it. This is why gentleness is not a trivial virtue. It is civilizing. It protects what force cannot build. To be too calculating is to become isolated. To be too severe is to invite resentment. To insist on winning every advantage is to lose what cannot be restored once gone. Trust, warmth, human affection. Better then to leave room in matters of gain, to be less exacting in matters of pride, and to know that sometimes appearing a little foolish is simply the price of remaining good. No one is perfect, and no life is lived without contradiction. In every person there is some light and some blindness, some generosity and some selfishness, some courage and some fear. We suffer partly because we want purity from ourselves, from others, from circumstances. Yet life offers mixture, not perfection. The wise do not waste their days demanding impossibility. They become gentler with human limitation without becoming careless toward truth. They learn contentment, not as resignation, but as release from the exhausting fantasy that everything must align perfectly for life to be worthwhile. There is little use in exposing the faults of others as a hobby. One who lives by constant judgment grows spiritually thin. To dwell forever on what is wrong in other people is often a sign that one has neglected one's own inner work. The person obsessed with others' failings rarely becomes noble through that obsession. More often, they become bitter, suspicious, and lonely. It is better to use solitude for reflection than to use leisure for criticism. Better to correct oneself in silence than to perform moral superiority in public. Speech requires special care because it seems small while its reach is immense. Words can outlive the speaker in the memory of the listener. A sentence spoken in anger can lodge in the soul longer than an injury to the body. A rumor can destroy what years of effort built. A mockery can silence confidence in a child. A public humiliation can echo privately in someone's thoughts for decades. Thus, it is not enough merely to avoid lying. One should also avoid speaking in ways that corrode trust, dignity, or hope. Even humor has limits. Even correction must preserve the humanity of the one corrected. Even truth should know compassion. Tolerance is often misunderstood. It is not weakness. It is not lack of discernment. It is the strength to meet reality without immediately hardening into hostility. A truly refined person is not one who appears elegant, but one whose manner eases rather than inflames the suffering of the world. To respect others is not to lower oneself. It is to reveal one's own depth. To carry a light spirit is not to live lightly, but to move through gravity without being crushed by it. Much of life changes according to the heart that beholds it. The same face appears harsh to one person and wounded to another. The same event appears unbearable to one and instructive to another. We do not create all reality by perception, but perception shapes the reality we are able to live with. Human relationships especially are mirror-like. If we approach others with suspicion, contempt, and readiness to be offended, we often evoke defensiveness in return. If we meet them with respect and steadiness, something in them often softens. The world does not always return our attitude immediately, but over time, disposition becomes destiny more often than people think. The great mistake of many lives is to confuse importance with accumulation. Cars, houses, reputation, and titles appear large because the world points to them constantly. Yet when illness enters, when age advances, when death nears, their scale changes at once. What then matters? A healthy body, a quiet conscience, a loved one beside the bed, a memory not poisoned by regret, the ability to leave without too much unfinished cruelty behind. In the end, human equality is not a political slogan, but a mortal fact. All are leveled by time. The rich and poor alike become memory, then dust. The wise response to this is neither despair nor indifference, but simplicity. Success attracts company. Hardship reveals character. When we prosper, we often mistake attention for affection. But difficulty separates the curious from the committed, the convenient from the loyal. Those who remain near in our dark seasons are a kind of grace. Those who ask after us when we no longer have shine are the ones whose presence should be honored. Yet compassion also requires discernment. Not every person who approaches deserves access. If you are not welcomed, withdraw without resentment. If you are not treasured, turn away without self-contempt. To stay where one is repeatedly diminished is not loyalty, but self-abandonment. Many things in life cannot be forced. Some people, once gone, cannot be retrieved. Some roads, once chosen, must simply be walked to their end. Some beautiful outcomes come not from striving but from waiting, not from seizing but from ripening. Patience is painful because it denies the ego immediate satisfaction, yet many of life's truest gifts arrive only when chased lightly. What is ordinary now often becomes precious later, once time has wrapped it in absence. A morning at home, a parent's voice, a familiar room, a hand once held without urgency. We rarely understand worthwhile fully inside it. Maturity is not measured by age alone. It is not proven by how long one has lived, how much one has suffered, how many places one has visited, or how much one has achieved. Real maturity shows itself in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to persist and when to stop, when to forgive and when to leave, when to hold responsibility and when to release guilt. It is the ability to endure complexity without becoming cynical. It is the grace to continue smiling, not because life has spared you, but because suffering has not been allowed to make you cruel. When a relationship ends, people often search desperately for a villain. Sometimes one exists, but sometimes endings are less dramatic and more sorrowful than that. Some affinities simply complete their course. Some people are given to us for one chapter, not the whole book. Not every fading warmth is treachery. Not every distance is betrayal. This does not make loss painless, but it makes it less bitter. There is mercy in understanding that not all partings are failures. Some are fulfillments of a limit. Neither person could change. Each morning offers a small metaphysical mercy, a beginning. The world restarts its light whether we deserve it or not. To wake and remind oneself to live one meaningful day, not an extraordinary day, not a triumphant day, but an honest and awake day, is already enough. Resentment darkens the one who carries it more than the one toward whom it is aimed. Better to do what can be done with the present hour. Better to place one's attention where action is still possible. Even grief moves, slowly, if not constantly, stirred. Gratitude is one of the purest forms of intelligence. To remember who stood beside you when you had nothing, who helped you when you were weak, who fed you when you were hungry, who believed in you before the world did, who stayed patient when you were still becoming yourself. This remembrance keeps the soul from becoming arrogant. Gratitude gathers people because gratitude is evidence that one is not spiritually blind. The ungrateful person may accumulate much, but they remain poor in one of the deepest senses. Still, kindness must have shape. If you are endlessly available, endlessly yielding, endlessly ready to be used, many will not call you virtuous. They will simply take more. To be good is not to erase your own boundaries. A healthy heart knows how to give and how to refuse. It knows how to forgive and how to protect itself. Self-respect is not the enemy of compassion. Indeed, without self-respect, compassion often decays into martyrdom, resentment, or silent despair. Few truths are more moving than the frailty of parents. When they age, time becomes visible. The hands that once held us steady begin to tremble. The memory that once stored our every need begins to falter. The voices that once guided us start to repeat themselves. And we, if we are wise, realize we are witnessing not inconvenience, but one of life's holiest reversals. We are being asked to return, in patience, what was once given to us in helplessness. To care tenderly for aging parents is not merely duty, it is participation in gratitude made visible. A career can be rebuilt, a fortune regained, but a season with one's parents, once lost, belongs forever to regret. Happiness is not theatre. It is not for display. Life is not performance. Love is not experiment. Friendship is not competition. Trust is not a test to see how much betrayal it can endure. And when someone wounds you intentionally, forgiveness may free your heart. But wisdom does not place the knife back into their hands. It is possible to let go of hatred without abandoning discernment. In fact, that is one of the highest forms of peace. There is no person who cannot eventually be left behind by time, and no wound that cannot soften if the soul stops reopening it. Often it is not injury itself that persists, but our refusal to stop feeding it with memory, interpretation, imagination, and longing. Human feeling fades gradually. Dignity, therefore, matters. If your presence no longer lives in someone's eyes, do not kneel for affection. If your place has vanished from someone's heart, do not beg to be restored. There is sorrow in this, yes, but also dignity. Life is not a battlefield where every encounter must end in victory or defeat. Between people, greater understanding reduces misunderstanding. Between situations, more willingness to yield reduces conflict. Not everything requires defense. Not every misunderstanding deserves a trial. Not every insult deserves response. The self takes itself too seriously and then wonders why life feels heavy. To hold the self more lightly is not to despise oneself, but to create room for perspective. Once we stop insisting that others validate us at every turn, life becomes more spacious. People will talk. Some will misunderstand, some will envy, some will invent, some will reduce you to what is most convenient for them to say. This cannot be fully prevented, but one can refuse to build one's home in the opinions of passers-by. To admit fault when wrong is honesty. To move on when slandered is grace. Since we cannot govern other tongues, we must learn to govern our response. Peace is often less about winning the narrative than refusing to be ruled by it. At the end of all reflection, life seems to ask for balance rather than mastery. A little clarity, a little surrender, a little striving, a little rest, a little seriousness, a little foolishness. We suffer because we cling where we should release and release where we should persevere. Yet life resembles tea, bitter at first, then slowly revealing sweetness to those patient enough to continue drinking. There is no need to explain everything, no need to triumph in every argument, no need to force recognition, no need to polish the self into perfection. It is enough to walk one's road with conscience intact. Do not mock others. Do not envy others. Do not spend your precious years measuring your life against surfaces you cannot truly see into. Happiness is inwardly tasted, not outwardly certified. And do not despise the old, the poor, the unsuccessful, or the broken, for time rearranges all positions. Today's strength becomes tomorrow's fragility. Today's certainty becomes tomorrow's dependence. Humility is not merely moral elegance. it is realism. So live gently. Be honest, but not cutting. Be compassionate, but not gullible. Be strong, but not hard. Guard your health, for it is more foundational than ambition admits. Treasure your parents, for their presence is one of life's vanishing graces. Honor those who remained beside you when your days were dark. Forgive what may be forgiven. Release what must be released. Do not make a burden of every gain and loss, every rumor and injury, every passing insult and failed expectation. The world is too wide and life too brief to carry so much unnecessary weight. Perhaps that is what wisdom finally becomes. Not brilliance, not superiority, not moral display, but the ability to pass through an impermanent world without losing tenderness. To continue choosing kindness after disappointment. To remain grateful after loss. To preserve a spacious heart in a narrow age. To accept bitterness without becoming bitter. To love without possession. To work without vanity. To speak without cruelty. To age without despair. And to leave this world with less regret because one has lived awake. And if there is any lasting art to being human, perhaps it is simply this: to know what to hold close, what to release softly, what to endure quietly, what to cherish while it remains, and how to keep one's inner light from being extinguished by the passing storms of the world.